The black CEO they fired walked back in, owning the whole company. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get her out of my boardroom. The words cracked through the air like a gavel. 2 security officers moved at once, heavy steps echoing across polished oak. The woman they reached for didn't flinch. Danielle Brooks, dark navy suit, no jewelry, posture steady, looked like calm carved from steel. Behind her, the city glowed through floor-to-ceiling glass, a skyline built by people who never imagined a woman like her would one day own it. At the far end of the table, Richard Hale, the silver-haired chairman, folded his hands. "You heard me," he said, voice smooth, cruelly polite. "She doesn't work here anymore." Phones lifted. A young analyst in the corner whispered, "Are they really arresting her?" The red light on her camera blinked, recording what would soon be history. One guard reached for Danielle's arm. She didn't resist. She simply turned her head toward Richard. "That's how you greet your former COO?" she asked quietly. Her tone wasn't pleading. It was precise, controlled, like someone who already knew how this scene would end. Richard smirked. Former being the key word. Security. Escort her out before she embarrasses herself further. Embarrass herself. The phrase lingered, thick and slow. Around the room, murmurs rose, nervous, eager, complicit. Someone stifled a laugh. Someone else muttered, "Guess she finally got what's coming." Then Danielle glanced at them all, eyes calm, assessing each face like files in a case she'd already closed. She'd sat at this table for 7 years through mergers, layoffs, crises, the architect of every number that made their bonuses possible. And now, in the same room she'd rebuilt from ruin, they were pushing her toward the door. But she didn't move. "Ma'am, please," one guard said, voice uncertain. She looked at him, steady. "Do your job," she replied. "Everyone else already has." Oh. The younger guard hesitated. Something about her composure made him falter. Richard noticed and barked, "Now." Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Danielle. The guards each took an arm. Cameras caught everything, the smirk on Richard's face, the tension in her jaw, the silence so thick it hummed. And then, with a voice low enough to make everyone lean in, Danielle said, "Funny, you keep saying your boardroom." She paused, eyes fixed on the man who'd fired her. "Let's see if you still feel that way in 5 minutes." The room went still. The elevator dinged down the hall, the sound of judgment arriving right on time. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged like the room itself had stopped breathing. Danielle didn't move. The guards stood uncertain, glancing at each other for cues that never came. Richard exhaled, a sharp breath through his nose. "You heard her," he said to no one in particular. "Finish it." But they didn't. Across the table, one of the younger executives, a woman barely 30, lowered her phone just enough to whisper, "Sir," she said, 5 minutes. Ugh. Richard's jaw flexed. And she didn't sound like she was bluffing. A quiet laugh rippled from someone at the end of the table, forced, nervous. "She's stalling. Probably wants attention." Danielle's eyes flicked toward him, steady, deliberate. "Attention is cheap," she said softly. "Accountability isn't." The younger guard shifted his stance, uneasy now. "Ma'am, It's fine," Danielle said. "You're not the one making the mistake." "I'm so—" Her tone wasn't kind, but it wasn't cruel either. It was something heavier, measured certainty. Outside the glass walls, the city moved on cars, sirens, another Monday, but in here, time had narrowed to the hum of air vents and the faint tap of Richard's wedding ring against the table. He leaned back in his chair, trying to reclaim control. "You really think this little performance is going to save your reputation?" Danielle almost smiled. "I didn't come to save anything." "Oh. Then what did you come for?" "To finish what I started." A murmur passed through the room. One of the finance directors whispered, "What's she talking about?" Another replied, "Doesn't matter. She's out." But it did matter, and they'd realize that soon enough. Then came the sound, a single chime from a phone. Not hers, not anyone's she recognized. Then another and another. The alerts multiplied like raindrops on glass. Every executive in the room glanced down at their devices. The same subject line flashed across every screen: Helios Global Ownership Transfer Notice. Richard blinked. What the hell is this? Danielle finally moved, straightening the sleeve of her blazer, as if preparing for a meeting she'd always intended to lead. Those 5 minutes, she said quietly, just expired. The older guard stepped back instinctively. The younger one lowered his hand from her arm. The analyst in the corner, still filming, mouthed, "Oh my God." Danielle took a single step toward the table, her heels clicking like a verdict. "You wanted me out," she said, calm and final. "Now watch who really walks out." She reached for the nearest chair, the one Richard had always claimed as his own, and pulled it back slowly. The sound of wood against marble filled the air, deliberate, undeniable. Then she sat down, and for the first time all morning, no one dared to speak. No one moved. The only sound was the digital heartbeat of notifications. Phones vibrated, emails loaded, confidence drained. Richard snatched his tablet, scrolling fast. "This has to be a mistake," he said, though his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. On screen, the words refused to vanish. "Transfer confirmed. Majority stakeholder, Danielle Brooks." A man 3 seats down muttered, "Impossible." Another whispered, "Who gave authorization?" Danielle answered without turning her head. "I did." Her tone landed like a closing door. Richard rose abruptly, chair scraping. "You're bluffing. I don't know what game you're playing, but—" "Games require equals," Danielle interrupted. "You fired me last week, remember? But you forgot one thing." She gestured toward the giant screen on the wall. "You left my name on the acquisition list, the one tied to Helios's holding trust." Richard froze. A few of the executives exchanged glances, connecting dots they'd ignored for years. "You bought the trust," one whispered. Danielle nodded once. Quietly, efficiently, the way you never imagined a black woman could. The words hit harder than any shout. Even the guards looked away, shame flickering across their faces. She tapped her phone. The main display behind her lit up with the company logo, then shifted to a document marked "Board Control Update Effective Immediately." Her assistant's voice came through the speaker, calm, professional. "Miss Brooks, all confirmations are complete. The board registration reflects your ownership. Would you like me to proceed with administrative adjustments?" Danielle didn't look at Richard. She looked at the room. "Yes, Nia. Start with leadership access." As, one by one, the executives' tablets and laptops began logging out, screen after screen flashing "access revoked." Panic rippled like static. A younger woman at the table gasped, "My dashboard just froze." Another man cursed under his breath, "This can't be happening." Richard slammed his fist against the table. "You think this stunt makes you powerful?" Danielle turned toward him, her expression almost gentle. "No," she said. "It proves you never were." Silence again. Not the nervous kind from before. This one was clean, absolute. The kind that comes after truth has entered the room and refuses to leave. In the corner, the analyst, still filming, whispered, "She just took the company." Her coworker murmured, "No, she's taking back respect." Danielle stood slowly, smoothing her jacket, every movement deliberate. "Mr. Hale," she said, using his full title like a blade, "you fired the COO. You just lost your chairmanship." "Oh." He looked at her, disbelief hollowing his voice. "You can't do this." She leaned forward slightly, steady as gravity. "I already did." The projector behind her flickered to black, leaving only her silhouette against the skyline. For a moment, the boardroom wasn't a place of power, it was a courtroom, and justice had finally taken its seat. The room exploded not with sound, but disbelief. Everywhere Danielle looked, faces had cracked. Power was dissolving in real time. Richard stumbled backward, his authority bleeding out of him like air from a punctured tire. This isn't legal," he said, though even he didn't believe it. He glanced at the company lawyer, Marcia Liu, whose hands hovered above her keyboard like someone watching a car crash she couldn't stop. "Mr. Hale," she said carefully, "the filings appear legitimate, time-stamped, verified by the state registrar." Richard's face went pale. "She can't have done this alone." Marcia hesitated. "No, sir. She had help from inside." All eyes turned toward the far corner. Amira, the intern who had been filming, lowered her phone. Guilt and pride tangled on her face. Danielle met her eyes and gave a subtle nod. Not thanks, not apology, just recognition. You always underestimate the quiet ones, Danielle said softly. That's why they see everything. One of the directors tried to recover. Look, Danielle, Miss Brooks, maybe we can find a settlement. Reconsider this power shift before it goes public. Danielle tilted her head. Public, she echoed. You think this stays in this room? Outside the glass wall, the city skyline shimmered, mirrored on every smartphone in the room. Notifications pinged again. A news alert flashed on one of the screens. Helios Global announces sudden change in leadership, source confirms female CEO. Richard turned, eyes wide. Who leaked that? Danielle smiled faintly. You did. 2 minutes ago, when you tried to forward that internal email to legal. He froze. The trap was complete before he even knew it existed. Nia's voice came softly through Danielle's earpiece, audible to no one else. The press conference feed is live, ma'am. 42,000 viewers and climbing. Danielle's reply was calm. Keep it running. Let them see what integrity looks like. And she looked around the room, the executives who had laughed, the ones who had stayed silent, the ones who had filmed. You all built your careers guarding a system that rewards arrogance and punishes restraint, she said. Today, restraint wins. One of the guards, the younger one from earlier, finally spoke. Do you need me to remove anyone, ma'am? Danielle turned toward Richard. Yes, she said, voice steady. Start with him. The guards exchanged glances, unsure, but Danielle's presence left no room for doubt. Richard Hale, the man who had once fired her, was now being escorted out of the same boardroom he used to dominate. Cameras followed him like a sentence being carried out. As the doors closed behind him, Danielle faced the rest of the room. The board is adjourned, she said simply. Then, almost as an afterthought, next time you see a black woman walk into a room, remember she's not always here to apply. Sometimes, she's here to collect. The words hung in the air long after she left her seat. By noon, the clip had already hit 1 million views. The title read, They Fired the Black CEO. She walked back in. No filters, no narration. Just raw footage, Danielle standing still while 2 guards hesitated, Richard shouting, and the moment she said, Let's see if you still feel that way in 5 minutes. It looped endlessly across timelines. Helios reversal, Danielle Brooks, quiet power. Reporters waited outside the glass tower now, cameras stacked like rifles aimed at truth. Every major outlet wanted a statement. Every analyst wanted an explanation. But Danielle didn't rush to the podium. She sat alone in her office, the same corner office that used to belong to Richard Hale. The skyline stretched behind her like a silent witness. She hadn't changed the furniture. She wanted the ghosts to stay, at least for today. Her assistant, Nia, entered quietly. The board's public relations team just resigned, and the union reps want to meet. Danielle nodded. They will, on my terms. Nia hesitated. And the press? Danielle looked out the window. Let them talk. They've been talking for years. Today, they can finally say something true. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Danielle Brooks? The voice was low, male, uncertain. Yes. This is the state attorney's office. We're reviewing a whistleblower complaint filed under your name. It's real, she said. You'll find everything you need in the Helios Compliance Archive. The line went silent. Then, you planned this. No, Danielle replied softly. I prepared for it. When she hung up, she exhaled slowly, the weight of 7 years pressing through her shoulders. For a moment, she wasn't the CEO. She was just a woman remembering every room she'd been told to leave, every time her tone was called aggressive, every time she'd been asked whose assistant she was. A knock broke the silence. Amira, the intern, stood hesitating in the doorway, holding her phone. I just wanted to thank you, she said. That video, it's everywhere. My mom said she cried watching it. Danielle smiled faintly. You were brave to keep filming. Amira shook her head. You were brave to stay still. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Danielle said, Don't delete that video. It's not just a moment. It's evidence. Of what? That calm isn't weakness. It's a weapon. Outside, the crowd grew louder, reporters calling her name, workers cheering, traffic halting. The world was learning her story in real time. Danielle stood, adjusted her blazer, and faced the mirror beside the window. Her reflection looked back, unflinching, unbroken. "Time to face them," she murmured. As she walked toward the elevator, the glass walls reflected her from every angle: the woman they fired, the leader they feared, the owner they never saw coming. And when the doors slid open, flashes erupted. Justice didn't need to announce itself. It simply arrived, walking calmly into the light. The lobby of Helios Global looked like a courtroom disguised in glass and marble. Reporters lined every inch of the floor, microphones extended, eyes sharp. The air was electric with curiosity, that tense pause before a verdict. When the elevator doors opened, the room fell silent. Danielle Brooks stepped out in the same navy suit she'd worn that morning, not a hair out of place. She didn't rush, didn't wave. Each step echoed like punctuation, a woman walking through noise she no longer owed an explanation. "Miss Brooks, did you plan the takeover?" someone shouted. "Was this revenge?" another asked. She stopped halfway to the podium, letting the questions collide and fade on their own. Then, in that perfect quiet, she began. "I wasn't fired because I failed," she said. "I was fired because I refused to fit the image they built around success." The crowd leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. "I've sat in rooms where my ideas were stolen, where my tone was criticized, where my seat at the table was treated like a favor instead of an achievement. But the thing about power," she paused, looking at the nearest lens, "is that it doesn't vanish when you're dismissed. It waits, and it remembers." Murmurs rippled through the press pool. A journalist from the Wall Street Ledger raised her hand. "Miss Brooks, do you think race played a role in your termination?" Danielle's eyes softened, but her voice didn't. "When a black woman is called unfit while outperforming her peers, you can call it what you like. I call it familiar." Gasps, flashbulbs. Every outlet captured that line. They'd quote it before the hour ended. She continued, measured and calm. "I didn't come here to shame anyone. I came to remind everyone watching that dignity is not negotiable. You don't earn respect by volume. You earn it by vision, and when you own your vision, no one can fire you from it." Behind her, Nia and Amira stood near the security line, watching in quiet awe. Even the guards, who had once held her arms, were still eyes lowered. Danielle glanced toward them. "To the people who escorted me out of that boardroom this morning," she said, voice steady, "you did your job. Now you've seen me do mine." End. The crowd erupted applause, questions, disbelief, admiration, a storm she didn't need to control. She gave one nod to Nia. The cameras flashed again. And then, the line that would headline every feed that night: "Helios will no longer measure leadership by who speaks the loudest, but by who stands the longest when no one's listening." She stepped away from the podium. No dramatic exit, just quiet certainty. Outside, a chant was already building. "Danielle, Danielle, Danielle!" In. The sound rolled through the lobby, out into the street, carried upward by every window reflecting her name. Justice, for once, wasn't loud. It was steady, and it was hers. By the next morning, the headlines had turned into a storm. Half of them called her a visionary. The other half called her dangerous. Hostile takeover or justice served. The CEO who outsmarted her own board. Danielle Brooks' hero or manipulator. Every outlet wanted a piece of her. Every pundit wanted to explain her motives. But none of them had been in that room when she said, "Power doesn't shout." From her office, Danielle watched the noise swirl like weather. Screens flickered with analysts dissecting her every word, her smile, even the color of her suit. The same networks that once ignored her achievements now devoured her defiance. Nia entered, tablet in hand. "Social metrics are through the roof," she said. 200 million views, 3 government inquiries, and 1,000 job applications overnight. Danielle didn't look up. "And the board?" "Resigned all except one. Marcia Liu." Danielle nodded. "Tell her to stay. We'll need one person who remembers how they used to think." Nia hesitated. "There's also backlash." "From who?" "Investors. Some want to pull out. They're calling it instability." Danielle finally looked up. Instability is what happens when truth moves in. She rose from her chair, walked toward the window, and stared down 40 stories below where protesters had gathered. Some held signs that read, "Representation wins." Others read, "She stole it." Both sides chanted louder, trying to drown each other out. A reporter's voice leaked from the hallway TV. While many celebrate her victory, critics argue Danielle Brooks weaponized identity politics to gain control of Helios Global. Nia reached to mute it, but Danielle stopped her. Let them talk. The loudest voices always run out of breath first. She turned back to her desk, a sleek slab of glass that once belonged to Richard Hale. His engraved nameplate still sat in the drawer. She lifted it, studied the reflection of her own face in the brass, then set it aside. "We'll replace the plate," she said, "but not the memory." Outside, thunder rolled sudden, distant, a storm crawling across the horizon, darkening the skyline. Danielle smiled faintly. "Fitting," she murmured. "They wanted a forecast? This is what change looks like." Her phone rang again, a private line. "Miss Brooks," said the voice of the state attorney, clipped and cautious. "We've confirmed multiple violations in the old board's accounting. You might want to prepare for fallout." "I already did," Danielle replied. The truth was never going to arrive quietly. When she hung up, she glanced at the reflection of the storm in the glass lightning flashing over the city she now commanded. And under her breath, she whispered, "They can call it backlash. I call it consequence." By midnight, the city had turned to glass and thunder. Rain streaked across the windows of Helios Tower like the world was trying to wash itself clean. Inside, Danielle sat alone in the boardroom, the same one where everything had fallen apart. The table was still polished, but the air had changed. It carried ghosts now, voices of disbelief, the scrape of Richard's chair, the echo of the words, "Get her out." She traced her fingers along the wood grain. Power didn't feel the way she expected. It wasn't triumph. It was weight, the kind that sat on your shoulders even when no one was watching. The door opened softly. It was Marcia Liu, the company's former counsel, still dressed in gray, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Danielle offered a tired smile. "Didn't try." Marcia set 1 cup down. "You won, Danielle. The board's gone. The media's obsessed. You have everything." Danielle looked at her. "That's the problem. Everything means everything that broke, too." Ugh. For a moment, the thunder outside filled the silence. Marcia sat across from her, cautious but sincere. "You know they'll spend years trying to take this from you again." "I know," Danielle said. "That's why I'm not leaving it unguarded this time." She leaned back, staring at the ceiling lights reflecting in the wet window. "When they fired me, I thought humiliation was the worst part. But it wasn't. It was realizing how easy it was for them to believe I didn't belong." Marcia nodded slowly. "You proved you did." Danielle shook her head. "No, I proved I didn't need to." Her words lingered between them, soft, final, like the quiet after lightning. Marcia sipped her coffee. "You know, when you walked in here that morning, I thought you'd lost your mind." Danielle laughed quietly. "Maybe I did, but sometimes you have to lose your fear to find your mind again." The rain intensified, a percussion against glass. The city below shimmered with headlights and reflections, each drop a tiny mirror of what she'd built and what it cost. "Do you regret it?" Marcia asked. Danielle thought for a long moment. "I regret how necessary it was." Lightning flashed again, illuminating her face calm, resolved, but no longer untouched. Power had changed her, not by corrupting, but by clarifying. It showed her who she could never be again, the woman who waited for permission. She rose from her chair, gathering the files spread across the table, new contracts, new hires, equity transfers. "Tomorrow," she said, "we rebuild, but this time, the foundation will look like the people who were never invited in." Marcia smiled faintly. "You really think they'll follow you?" Danielle turned toward the window, toward her reflection framed by stormlight. "They don't have to," she said. "They'll feel it." Outside, thunder rolled again, not warning, not threat, just truth announcing itself. And somewhere deep inside that sound, Danielle finally felt at peace. The storm broke at dawn. Sunlight sliced through the clouds, spilling gold across the glass towers of the city, a different kind of spotlight. Helios Global reopened its doors at 8 a.m., but the building didn't feel the same. The tension that once lived in its marble floors had been replaced by something quieter: anticipation. Danielle Brooks walked through the lobby surrounded by new faces. Not investors, not executives, but staff engineers, janitors, assistance people who had once walked past that boardroom afraid to speak. Now they greeted her with cautious smiles, unsure if they were allowed to hope. She stopped near reception. "Morning," she said. A woman behind the desk froze. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." Danielle smiled. "Just Danielle is fine. Titles are for people who still need to prove something." Word of that line spread through the floors faster than any memo. By noon, the culture of Helios began to bend toward her voice. In the renovated conference room, Danielle stood at the head of the table, the same spot Richard once claimed, flanked by Nia, Marcia, and Amira. Behind them, the company's new vision statement glowed on a digital screen. Integrity, inclusion, impact. Danielle turned to the group of department heads, many of them new, some still stunned to be there. "I don't want a company that only looks different in photos," she began. "I want one that feels different in every decision. No PowerPoints, no scripts, just her. When you walk into a room, you bring someone's story with you," she continued. "I'm here because people believed in mine even when I didn't have the title to defend it." Her gaze softened. "Now, I expect every person in this company to do the same for someone else." A hand rose from the far end of the table. It was a young man from operations, voice uncertain. "Miss, Danielle, what about the shareholders who left?" Danielle didn't hesitate. "They'll be replaced with stakeholders who actually care what we build." Laughter broke the tension. Even Marcia smiled, the lawyer who once questioned every move, now taking notes with quiet admiration. Danielle looked around the room, seeing the faces that mirrored the city, different tones, different languages, the kind of diversity that used to be treated like a risk. "This," she said, "is what stability looks like." Outside the windows, sunlight poured over the skyline, the same city that once watched her humiliation now reflecting her renewal. As the meeting ended, Amira lingered behind. "I still can't believe this is real," she said. Danielle handed her a new ID badge, silver lettering, bold, "Amira Lopez, Media Director." "It's real because you hit record," Danielle replied. "Keep doing that. The world forgets fast. Our job is to remind it." The young woman's eyes watered. "Thank you," Danielle smiled. "Don't thank me. Build something that outlives me." When Amira left, Danielle looked around the empty room, sunlight filling the space where shame once lived. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to breathe without defense. Rebuilding wasn't about walls or titles. It was about replacing silence with legacy. 2 months later, the world had changed and so had Helios. Revenue climbed. Employee turnover fell. Headlines shifted from controversial takeover to the quiet revolution of Helios Global. But peace, like power, never came without a price. Danielle's office buzzed with meetings, calls, and negotiations. Yet today felt different, heavier. Nia entered, expression serious. "You should see this." She handed over a printed report. Danielle scanned it. A government audit. Anonymous complaint. Words bolded in red. Conflict of interest. Abuse of authority. Danielle set the paper down slowly. "They're coming for me again." Nia hesitated. "It's an external investigation. They say you bypassed corporate procedures during the takeover." Danielle smiled faintly. "Of course I did. The procedures were designed to keep me out." Still, she knew what this meant. Another trial, not in a courtroom but in the public eye. That evening, she met Marcia in the dim light of the boardroom. The city shimmered below, indifferent and beautiful. "They're trying to make an example out of you," Marcia said. "You could step down temporarily, protect your reputation." Danielle looked up, calm but unyielding. "I didn't rebuild Helios just to hide when it mattered most." She rose and crossed to the window, thunder again brewing somewhere beyond the skyline. "Let them investigate. Every file is clean." "Marcia Sayed, you know truth doesn't always win first." "Maybe not," Danielle said, "but it never loses last." The next morning, the hearings began. Cameras flashed as she walked into the marble hall, same poise, same silence that once broke a boardroom. Reporters yelled questions. "Miss Brooks, did you manipulate the stock transfer? Did you threaten the board?" Danielle didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her calm was the statement. Inside, the panel waited. A man in a gray suit, an auditor, spoke with rehearsed authority. "Miss Brooks, can you confirm you orchestrated your reinstatement without board consent?" Danielle met his eyes. "Consent is a privilege of fairness. I took back what was mine." A murmur rolled through the room. Someone whispered, "She's not backing down." She didn't. For hours, she answered every question with precision, not defiance. Each response measured like a courtroom closing argument. When the hearing adjourned, she stepped outside into the camera's glare. The crowd had doubled. Protest signs again, justice for Danielle. Beside, no one is above the rules. Amira waited by the car, worry in her eyes. They'll twist every word you said. Danielle nodded. Let them. I'm not here to win arguments. I'm here to outlast lies. She looked toward the skyline, the same city that once doubted her, now watching again, testing her. Power doesn't protect you, she murmured. It exposes you. Then she smiled, calm, assured, unbroken. Good. Let them see everything. The hearing dragged into its third week. Outside, reporters camped under umbrellas, their lenses fogged with rain and speculation. Inside, the marble hall smelled of coffee, paper, and tension. Danielle Brooks sat at the witness table, posture straight, hands folded. Calm had become her armor. Every day, they asked the same questions in different ways, hoping fatigue would make her falter. It didn't. Miss Brooks, the lead investigator began again. You admit you transferred majority ownership through a holding trust without notifying the full board. How is that not manipulation? Danielle looked at him steady. Manipulation is deceit. Transparency is documentation. You have every receipt. The audience murmured. The man shifted in his seat. Then why hide your identity during the acquisition? Because sometimes the only way to be seen, she said, is to stop announcing your presence. The quote would be everywhere by nightfall. Marcia watched from the second row, eyes filled with restrained pride. Nia tapped on her tablet, tracking real-time reactions online, hashtags multiplying by the minute. Number, the Brooks hearing. Quiet justice. When the panel adjourned for deliberation, the room buzzed like static. Danielle stood, collected her papers, and walked out past cameras that flared like lightning. A reporter shouted, "If they find you guilty, will you resign?" Danielle paused at the top of the courthouse steps, rain spotting her suit. "You can't be fired from what you built," she said, then descended into the flashes. Hours later, back in her office, she waited alone again, just as she had before the storm began. The city outside glittered with restless anticipation. Her phone buzzed once. It was a message from Marcia. "Verdict in 10 minutes. Brace yourself." Danielle set the phone down and exhaled. The weight in her chest wasn't fear, it was memory. Every closed door, every polite dismissal, every "you don't belong here." At 9 p.m., the verdict went live. The investigator's voice came through the press feed. After review of the evidence, the panel finds no wrongdoing in Miss Brooks's reinstatement or acquisition of Helios Global. All actions taken were within the bounds of corporate law. The crowd outside erupted. Cheers drowned the rain. Flashlights cut through the night like fireworks of relief. In her office, Danielle didn't smile right away. She let the words settle, not victory, just vindication. Then she whispered, "Finally, truth caught up." Her phone buzzed again. It was Nia. "Ma'am, the statement's everywhere. They're calling you the face of ethical power." Danielle's laugh was soft, almost weary. "There's no such thing as ethical power, only accountable power." She rose, crossed to the window, and looked down at the glowing city, the same one that once turned its back, now chanting her name. "Justice," she murmured, "wasn't the verdict. It was the endurance." Outside, thunder rolled again, not threatening this time, but echoing her heartbeat. Tomorrow, she'd return to work. But tonight, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to rest. A year later, the name Helios Global meant something entirely different. The marble floors still shone, but the walls now carried portraits of new faces, engineers, interns, and team leads who once worked in shadows. The company newsletter no longer opened with profit margins, but with mentorship stories. And at the top of every edition, one line remained bold. Integrity is not a slogan. It's a signature. Danielle Brooks. This morning, Danielle stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace, the skyline breathing in gold light. The city stretched wide and awake beneath her, alive with possibility. The wind tugged gently at her blazer as she stared at the horizon, the same direction she'd once faced when everything fell apart. Nia approached with a tablet in hand. "They're waiting for you downstairs. Press, partners, employees, all of them." Danielle smiled faintly. "Let them wait a minute. I want to remember this." Nia hesitated, then said softly, "It's the anniversary." "I know." Danielle turned, eyes distant but calm. "A year since they tried to erase my name. Now it's carved into the company I built." She took one last breath of the cold air and headed toward the elevator. Downstairs, the main hall was packed, not with executives in tailored suits, but with every employee from every floor. A ripple of applause rose as she appeared, not the polite kind reserved for titles, but the genuine kind reserved for gratitude. She stepped up to the podium. No notes this time. "When they fired me," she began, "I thought my silence that day would haunt me. But I learned something. Silence can be strategy. Dignity can be defiance." The crowd leaned closer. "I didn't win because I was louder. I won because I never let their noise rewrite my worth. You don't have to fight to be seen. You just have to keep standing until they can't look away." The room filled with quiet awe. In the back, Amira raised her camera again, recording. As always, Danielle noticed and smiled. "Keep filming," she said. "Because every time someone watches this, I want them to see proof that grace can outlast cruelty." Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, almost ceremonial now, as if the sky itself remembered. Danielle glanced around the hall faces of every color, every background, every story. Helios was no longer just a company. It was a mirror of resilience. She ended simply, the same way she began everything. "Power doesn't shout," she said. "It builds, it protects, and when necessary, it walks back in." Applause swelled, rolling through the hall like waves against glass. Later, as she stepped outside, the air was clear. The city lights flickered below, steady and alive. She looked up once more at the tower that once humiliated her and smiled. Justice had never been about revenge. It was about rewriting the room and making sure no one ever had to knock again.